بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أسعد الله صباحكم بكل خير. أهلا وسهلا بكم في فعاليات اليوم الثالث والأخير من المنتدى السعودي الثاني للملكية الفكرية 2013. جلستنا لهذا اليوم هي الجلسة الخامسة، وستكون بعنوان أثر مكاتب نقل التقنية في النمو الاقتصادي. يرأس الجلسة سعادة الدكتور سلطان المبارك، مدير حاضنة بادر للتقنية الحيوية في مدينة الملك عبد العزيز للعلوم والتقنية. ويشارك في هذه الجلسة كل من الدكتور باتريك أوريلي من الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، والدكتور علي بالطيب خبير ترخيص نقل تقنية مؤسسة جمعية رأس المال المخاطر في تونس، والدكتور سوز تياملين وهو المدير التنفيذي لشركة وساطة الملكية الفكرية في سنغافورة، والدكتور جميل الخطيب وهو مستشار لمركز ريسكوا للتكنولوجيا في الأردن.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم. Good morning everybody. I'm pleased to chair this session, and just for a quick introduction for the speakers, we're having with me here Mr. Pat O'Reilly, which is a partner with Phoenixson, Henderson, Faribault, and Garrett Donner in Washington, D.C. And I have with me also Mr. Ala بالطيب, Alaya بالطيب, a technology licensing practitioner and venture capitalist professional and founder of Tunisian Venture Capital Association. Dr. Z also, we know him, he gave a presentation yesterday, and Dr. Murad, he's the executive director of SCOA Technology Center. He is replaced by Mr. Jamil Al-Khatib, وهو مستشار للسكوا في مركز التكنولوجي وعضو في جمعية تراخيص الدول العربية في technology transfer. He's specialized in technology transfer, and he worked in several Arabic countries like UAE, Jordan, Palestine in technology transfer and its institutions. And he worked in several European projects in supporting the entrepreneurship and innovation. And he also worked in several national projects in Jordan in ICT and also at the National Technology Plan. So I welcome everybody with me here in the session. First, we'll start with Mr. O'Reilly. Mr. O'Reilly presentation, it's going to be about the role of technology transfer offices in the economic development. And his presentation is about the academic intellectual property and the impact on economic development. He's going to talk about the Bayh-Dole Act and contribution of university research to economy. Before I start this presentation, I would like just to give a comment about the Bayh-Dole Act. A few years ago, I worked at the OTT, the Office of Technology Transfer in Rockville, Maryland, in the United States. And most, if not all, the employees are stating that if such act was not there, then the volume and the quality of most of the innovation that reflected positively to the economy of the United States would not happen. And in 2010, the American University Technology Managers were celebrating the 30th anniversary for the Bayh-Dole Act. And actually, it was not a celebration only. It was a celebration, and they were thinking of amending such act. So for them, as well as for the rest of the world, it's not an act only, it's an act and an art. It changed the economy dramatically. It reflects back to the economy, and it raised the economy by an amount of almost $1 trillion since it has been implemented. So I'm throwing these questions and these issues to Mr. O'Reilly to start his presentation.
Okay. Good morning, and thank you again for being here to pay attention to me. I have a challenge this morning to demonstrate, from the statistics at least, that that research at universities has an impact on the economy. I think everyone would agree that academic research has value. Research at universities, at least for academic reasons, are valuable. The hard part is establishing that research has impact on the economy itself. It's not measured easily because it's basically indirect in most cases. Universities in the U.S. for years have been trying to establish through their statistics that the research activity that's funded by government and funded by outside industry has a beneficial impact in the economy. Some of the statistics that I'm going to go through may or may not have any value in other countries. It may not directly relate, but as was mentioned just now by the chairman, that the Bayh-Dole Act has had such an impact and had such a dramatic increase in the benefit from research at universities that it has been copied in some degree by many other countries, Japan, Germany, Korea, and Taiwan among them. How do we measure it? There are some indirect ways that can measure value of the research. Certainly, one of the things that everyone seems to count is the number of patents that result from university research. But the existence of a patent by itself really doesn't mean that it has any market value or any market impact. Those of us in the patent business know that you can always get a patent, but a patent by itself doesn't give you any position in a marketplace. Universities, however, are very frugal. Generally, they're not going to pay for obtaining patents. In fact, many universities have a policy of only obtaining patents if they have a licensee who's going to pay for it, going to reimburse the university for the cost of obtaining the patents. There are some patents that universities will pursue on their own if they have unique economic value. But the net effect of that is that if universities get patents, it's because there's either someone else is paying for it, which means there's some value perceived by someone, or the university sees a significant economic value in those patents. After all, universities are mostly in the business of publishing, and if they're not in the business of necessarily creating an asset portfolio for no particular reason. The other thing, another measure, another statistic is the amount of money that a university receives in research, for research. And I don't really think that reflects the impact on the economy so much as an expectation by those who are participating in contributing to that research. It's hard to determine what percentage of funded research is actually an economic impact. Do we measure the research dollars per patent obtained? I don't think that's an accurate number. And there's a lot of statistics. I tried to calculate the number of patents for the amount of research dollars in a year, and it came out to over $1 million per patent. That doesn't seem to translate into any economic result. Return on investment, again, it's a little inaccurate and difficult to calculate. There's no direct correlation, I think, the amount of money that's spent on research to the amount of impact the research has on the economy. Revenue received by universities, this is perhaps closer in the sense that if someone is paying the university for the right to use the results of the research, then there must, that licensee, that party must see some economic value, and we could argue that that directly relates to the value to the economy. It does, we could take, for example, the licensing revenue, and assume that, let's say, a 5% royalty is that revenue results from a 5% royalty, then you could take 105% of that and say that's the impact. But it ignores some other aspects, and particularly equity investments that many universities today are starting up companies as opposed to taking revenue. And that leads to the last point. How many companies did the university establish? And what is the number of companies, startup companies that result from university technology can be measured. But actually what's more important is how long they last. You can start up a company pretty easily, but if the company isn't successful, it's not a good measure. So let's talk about some of the statistics. Oh, there's one other measure, is case studies. Empirically, everyone knows that universities contribute to the economy. Here's examples of things that were contributed by universities over the years. The most recent one, of course, Google from Stanford, is an example of a startup company supported or incubated by a university, which has become significant. And of course, Stanford has benefited significantly because they have quite a bit of stock in Google. Before 1980, university research in the US was primarily academic. A good deal of it was also funded by the government. But at that time, all the results of the research, the patents that resulted from the research, government-funded research, was publicly owned. Basically, all the patents were owned by everybody, so you could use them freely. The government, the view was that since taxpayers paid for the patents, all the taxpayers were free to use the patents. The net effect of that was only 5% of the results were ever used commercially, because if it required an investment into the development of that patented technology, and no one was going to invest if everyone else could freely use it as well. There was also some incoherence in terms of the funding. Every agency had a different view as to the rules on funding and what the university could do with it. University research that wasn't government funded but was otherwise funded by the university was generally directed, maybe funded by the states, generally directed towards the local needs, agriculture, for example, or mining, depending on where the university was located. And before 1980, there was very little industry-sponsored research. The industry didn't fund research at universities because primarily before 1980, I would say most industries still looked internally. They had their own internal R&D facilities and didn't fund outside research at all. The Bayh-Dole Act in 1980 induced a much greater interest in university research. Just the fundamentals of Bayh-Dole, it applies to government-funded research at universities and small companies. The university must report the results of the research and may elect to retain title to the results of the research. In fact, I think the universities almost uniformly elect to retain title. They must obtain patents on the results, but they may not sell the patents. They have to retain the ownership of the patents. They must give the government a free license to use the results, which of course is, since the government paid for it, it's reasonable, but it's only for government uses, not for commercial uses. If they license the technology, they must give preference to small entities and to US exploitation in the country. These two requirements are very often waived by the agencies because much of the technology is not effectively exploited by small companies or in the US. Any revenue obtained by the university must be shared with the inventors. The classical approach, most universities, I think it's like 1/3 to the inventor, 1/3 to the inventor's department within the university, and 1/3 to the university. And then there's the government march-in rights, which says that if the technology is not adequately being exploited or for reasons of public health and welfare, the government can come in and take the technology back if they want to. This has been attempted 3 or 4 times since 1980, but has never been, never exercised. Most of the time the attempts were because the pharmaceutical prices were too high and the government said it's not our job to deal with pricing of products. The one other time was during there was a, after 2012 or whenever they had the people sending envelopes full of poison and they wanted a pharmaceutical antibiotic, and Bayer said they didn't have enough, so they threatened to exercise march-in rights, and all of a sudden Bayer found more. So this is an example of what happened to the universities after 1980. You can see the number of patents issued in the universities. I don't know if you can see the line, but 1980 is the fourth from the right. And so you can see the dramatic increase in the number of patents, also the dramatic increase in the number of university technology transfer offices since 1980. So has Bayh-Dole been achieved, the purpose of Bayh-Dole been achieved? Well, there are now uniform policies across all government agencies for funding, stimulated industry-sponsored research. I think this is an interesting coincidence, and the 74% increase in the industry-sponsored research at universities. It also happened to coincide with the industry's belief that they could not afford to do all the research internally because they basically couldn't hire all the smart people and it was inefficient in any event. So they started funding a lot of research at universities. And according to AUTM, the Association of University Technology Managers, from whom most of these statistics are obtained, more than 5,000 new companies are formed around university research results. Patents issued, you saw the dramatic increase in patents. Universities helped introduce 3,000 new products in the market. I'm not quite